Josh, how are you? So great to see you today.
I'm great, Sandy. Great seeing you.
All right. So we talked a little bit before this. We're not too far from each other. You're in Jersey. I'm in Virginia. Weather's been a little up and down, right?
That's right. That's right. But you know what? We're on the verge of getting through winter, and so the springtime's ahead.
Yes, we're recording this towards the end of February, and I do a happy dance on March 1st.
March 1st. Right.
Right? Because then you're like, okay, whew, I made it through the winter, and now spring is on the way.
See, I always say that because I feel like we know we could get snow in March, but that's okay because March 1st, we've made it and we're there. And with the spring forward, with the times and the clocks and everything, we made it.
We made it. Exactly. We're almost there. All right. So everybody has a story, and I love to hear people's stories. So what is your story? How did you get to where you are today?
My story is a work in progress. It's a happy one because I've been so fortunate in my life. I feel like I've had all the advantages, but I've been mindful of that. I always have been grateful for that. And recently I wrote a book that I think is 25 years in the making. I have a book called The Unicorn in You, which is a path to peace and joy. And while I've been working on it for 2 years, I feel like it has been 25 years in the making because for that length of time, I've been reading self-help books, trying to find different methodologies for happiness and joy and peace. And it was around the onset of COVID that I said, let me try to create something for myself because I wasn't able to draw from any of my experiences that came very naturally or organically. And I just wanted to emphasize more being rather than doing. And that was the genesis for this book and a little bit about my background in it.
Nice, nice. So you had 25 years in the making. My book that came out last year, Happiness Solved, same thing.
Right.
30 years in the making. I get that. So what is some of that story that brought you to where you felt like I have to write about this?
Right. So my background is, by profession, I'm a real estate executive. I've been in different parts of real estate for probably that length of time. But it was around the start of my career, probably a little bit earlier, when I was in my late teens, maybe very early 20s, when I started experiencing some really profound sadness, depression, and some struggles. Probably became even more pronounced in my late 20s and even early 30s at its peak. And I was always trying to reach for something, some methodology, some mechanism, and not really understanding what I was really, I think, seeking, kind of looking more inward. And so what I found was, especially at the onset of COVID, which is amazing, I think 2 years ago now, it's crazy and it feels like 5, but I felt like I needed something to help me be a little more solid. Really what I was looking for was to be light. And that was the first breakthrough. The idea that was to be light, I first needed to be solid. So my process over 25 years and my story has been that I've been reaching and searching and probably not looking for something that's much more simplified and really kind of looking within. And that's what The Unicorn in You is about finding that foundation for being, our foundation of principles. And for me, it came down to kindness and gratitude and integrity, humility and acceptance. And those 5 things put together gave me a foundation for being and allowed me to just then ultimately feel light. And that's kind of the process, which I'm hopeful for many is not so much a process. It's just more of a perspective and an approach.
So what is that unicorn in you? If you were to just summarize that, what does that mean to you? Because I think the word unicorn kind of means something different to a lot of people.
Well, I'll tell a very quick story of the genesis for the unicorn symbolically in the book. Probably a few months before I started this book, I was at my nephew's soccer game down in South Florida, and he's 9 years old. And I said, where is his sister? She's 4 years old, my niece, and they pointed to across the field in a little grass area, and I saw her, and she was playing as only a 4-year-old could, very unselfconsciously, sort of basking what I thought was peace and joy. She came running towards me, and I noticed these colorful sneakers she was wearing. And I said, I love your rainbow sneakers. And she says, they're not rainbows, they're unicorns. And for a moment, I just felt captivated by this image that she was projecting. And I said, I wish I could sort of feel the way she looks. And that triggered this feeling in my mind that the unicorn, symbolically for all of us, is kind of our greater potential. In many ways, it's so aspirational. I think we get caught up in this unicorn as being very mythical, but to me, it's this feeling of lightness, almost of this very peaceful, joyful creature.
Right. And then sometimes people use it in the context of it's a rarity.
Right.
It's like you'll never find it.
That's right.
Right.
In business, it's a rarity. And in life, he's a unicorn, she's a unicorn, and you'll never find that. And that's what I think is so kind of, it's aspirational because for me, it was so much of the idea of getting out of my own head that really led me to this point more than anything else. And I know that you know, between all of your teachings with Happiness Solved, I think that so much of it is getting out of our own heads. In so many ways, I view this as an unself-help book. And that's how I have kind of positioned and presented it. And it really is twofold. On one hand, it's this idea that, okay, it's not a typical self-help book where there's a process, this is it, follow this and do that, because that's what kind of led me down a path that I couldn't really get out of. And the second part is that I believe that happiness and peace and joy, much of it comes from being selfless. And the principles that I mentioned have to do with selflessness. So therein kind of lies the unself really perspective of the unicorn in you. It's about getting out of our heads and being more selfless.
So you said there's kind of like five things that it's, and what are those
so
five
it's
things
kindness,
again?
It's gratitude, it's integrity, humility, and acceptance. And I see you writing them, so there'll be a test later. But it's something that comes natural to all of us. And I will say this, what I found in sort of identifying those elements, what I found very helpful was to discover one key ingredient for each of those and distill those even further. So for kindness, I felt that compassion was important. For gratitude, I felt like awareness was necessary. Integrity, some may think honesty, I think it has to do with decency. Humility, I believe, is about perspective. And acceptance has to do with flexibility. Mostly in our minds, this idea of our stretch or our bend in our heads, that ability to have flex, to hold conflicting emotions, conflicting feelings, and knowing that it's okay. We're accepting reality. And so I think those five ingredients, as part of those five principles, really helped me get down to a clearer path to peace and joy.
I love it. And I want to talk about each one of these in a little bit greater detail. So kindness. So what do you say about kindness in the book?
For me, I think the focal point of kindness in The Unicorn You has to do with releasing our judgments. I think, it's one thing for me to say to folks, hey, listen, let's be more kind. It's not for its own sake, for sure. I outline why it's helpful to ourselves to be kind, but I also show how to do it. And I think the clearest way to do that is by letting go of our judgments. And specifically this idea, that very old adage that you walk a mile in someone's shoes, before. I think that's so critical. We all have a sense of imagination. And so when we're maybe a little short with someone, or we see someone that may be short with us, perhaps we imagine what may be going on with them. I'm such a believer that you never know what's happening behind anyone's closed doors. If there's one thing I know to be true, it's that. What we see online, what we see on television, we just don't know what's really happening. And so I think when we give some benefit of the doubt and when we let go of judgments, I think that's a very clearer path, much clearer path to kindness.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And what about being kind to yourself? Because I've talked about this multiple times where there's been this be kind to everybody.
Yeah.
Which is great. And we need to be kind to everybody. But I feel like we're forgetting about us. We got to be kind to ourselves.
And I love that you said that because, what drove the idea of kindness, as I mentioned, is compassion. And so much of that is self-compassion. The second principle of gratitude, which we'll get to, I had shared with someone recently that I was developing a gratitude practice where I was, at the end of each day, writing down a few things that I was grateful for. In addition to that, I was writing down a few things that I appreciated about myself. And that was really powerful. I think that for so long, I have been so hard on myself. I've been my toughest critic. And in many ways, like many people, we don't give ourselves a break. And self-compassion is essential as a part of kindness. You're absolutely right. I'm sure that you teach that a lot when you're talking about happiness and finding it ourselves, because it really starts from within.
It starts from within, and I'm glad that you're writing down what you appreciate about yourself, because some of my clients I talk to and I'm like, you need to celebrate your wins every day. And they're like, no, that's just being arrogant. I'm like, it's not arrogant at all, because we tend to, have so many great things happen each day, and our mind automatically goes to all the things that didn't happen or all the things that didn't work
Now, do you
out.
think that reluctance from many of your clients is a result of an insecurity, or a sense that it's boasting, or I'm not to celebrate, I'm not worthy of this kind of acknowledgement? What do you think drives some of that? Obviously, for everyone, it's different.
I think it's different for everyone, but I think all of the above. And I think that sometimes people, they may feel that they love themselves, and they probably don't. I know I only say that because my path, I was in therapy for probably 15 years before the therapist said, you need to work on self-love. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I love myself. Right? It's a much bigger thing than people realize. And if we're constantly criticizing ourselves and not willing and focusing on all the negative, and instead of celebrating all the positive, then you're just reinforcing that we're not good
I think
enough.
you touch on something that is so important that doesn't get talked about enough. And when we talk about even this idea of kindness, certainly all of us have experienced encounters with people where maybe, they're unkind to us, and we get a little put off. And we don't realize most of the time it has nothing to do with us. And that speaks to exactly what you're talking about, that self-love. Because on the flip side of it, folks that are projecting that probably are having a harder time internally.
Exactly. And I tell you, 10 times out of 10, when there is something like that going on, it's not about you, it's about them. Has nothing to do. But people don't, it's so hard to recognize that. And I'm not making anybody wrong for that. It's just being self-aware and making sure that you really pay attention to what's going on in your mind. All right.
Gratitude.
Second principle, gratitude. My favorite practice.
Me too. And, I feel like in many ways of all of these, if everyone's at a different point in their journey, some people are new to this sort of world of personal growth and development. I think gratitude is the easiest one to get started with. And you can do it on any level. You can do it in any way. And one thing I write in the book is that there's no wrong way to do it. The only wrong way would be not to do it at all. And maybe it just means that in the morning you have a moment of recognition of something, and that's your way of starting getting comfortable with a gratitude practice. Or maybe you do something in the evening. Maybe there's a specific meditation you do. But I think in many ways it just has to do with that moment of recognition. And if it's a little bit longer and it's a written practice or something more involved, that's great. And I also think that in many ways, just like working out, we need to change up our gratitude routines. We need to work different muscles. And so switching up can be very helpful.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Yeah. And that gratitude practice, whether you do it in the morning or the evening, or really anytime during the day, when you need to just press that, I call it pressing the reset button.
It's medicine, right?
Yeah. It totally is.
It's interesting totally because gratitude, I don't know if you found this during the past couple of years, I reconnected more deeply with nature through gratitude. It's not something that I necessarily felt deeply in recent years. I always enjoyed being outdoors, but I don't know if you found, as we were kind of all cooped up, being outside, did you feel like that, I guess emphasized any more deeper level of gratitude from nature?
Oh, yes. Because I got my perpetual pandemic puppy in late April of 2020. And it was so nice because I'm not one to go out and take walks by myself. And now I am out multiple times during the day with my dog. And I would just walk around and just breathe in the air and just look at the sky. And especially at night, I love looking up at the stars and just, because it makes us feel like we're just such the small part of something.
I love that. You're going to enjoy the unicorn in you because you're talking about everything I mentioned here. And I spoke the other day to someone that my favorite time of the day is my last walk of my dog at night. It's the most peaceful time. And like you, I look up at the stars and I get a sense of, how small I am in the scheme of things. It's great. It reduces me, but it grounds me. And I have this little pup, and it's like this last moment to be thankful for this day again and to try again tomorrow, hopefully. So I completely agree.
Yeah. All right. Principle number 3, integrity. Love that.
It's having integrity is not for its own sake. I think people think that could scoff at it or think that you have to distill it down a bit further and it's complicated. And to me, that's the beauty of the principle. You either have integrity or you don't. And perhaps, of a certain age where I know that and appreciate that there was a time when my grandfather used to say to me, your word is your bond. You shake someone's hand, it means something. You say you're going to be somewhere, you're there. And it really has to do, in my mind, with decency. With a decent person is very honest, and they do what they say they're going to do. And in many ways, I feel like the key to this, it just has to do with defining your values. And integrity is not intended, particularly as a principle in the book, to be this self-righteous type of way of being, but just more a sense of defining what you stand for and knowing that you have a sense of principle and integrity, and people can count on you.
Yeah. And do you find that people are becoming less and less caring about integrity? Right. And they break their word and they cancel at the last minute? So I just said that exact thing. I was speaking to a friend, James Hicks, on his program, and we talked about technology. And I said, I certainly, I went to college when we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have emails. Been an answering machine, but at the same time, you made plans, you showed up. And it's a small thing, but it's not insignificant because now I think it's easy to, I'll be late, I can't make it. It's easy to reschedule. It's easy just to bail on someone. And I think, unfortunately, it's become a little too easy. And that builds a pattern and builds repetition of habit. I really believe that because in many ways, if you say you're making plans for someone, you show up and you do that, and people know that they can count on you, that your word means something. Well, I know maybe it's just the way people are being raised. I don't know, because I was raised with a lot of integrity, and that you show up. And
and that's the great qualifier these days, isn't it? I know life happens, but... Right. And it's okay if it's all the time, but when it's and I agree with you. I think it's just more a question of having that sense of integrity within and knowing that's what you project, and that, again, your word means something. And, that idea of, life happens has been, I think life happens and you're on mute were the two phrases I heard the most of the last 2 years. But the former certainly has merit, but it's just the idea of be a person who does what you say you're going to do.
Right. And now, granted, COVID did and still does give us an excuse. And I have to be honest, didn't say I had COVID, but there was only one time when I totally forgot that I had a nail appointment, and I texted her 10 minutes before, and I was like, I'm not feeling well. That's all I said. And that's all you have to say these days is I'm not feeling well. Like, oh, don't worry about it. And I felt so guilty because she knows with me, I've been her client for 14 years. Like, she knows that I rarely miss an appointment. And I felt so bad. But then it was like, you felt bad because that's the kind of person you are. You pulled out the COVID card, sort of, but not really. I wasn't feeling well. Sort of. I just said I wasn't. And I was
excused. And it's so funny though, but it's true. I think that I believe that the company you keep is so important with integrity as well. What do we say that we're? There's so many ways of saying it. We're the combination of our 5 friends or something like that, our 5 closest friends. And in many ways, I write in the book, you want to have integrity, keep company with people who have it as well. Humility.
Yes, for sure.
I think in many ways, I think this is one of the most underappreciated qualities. And I had this in here because I felt that this is so important for peace and joy as a matter of understanding our significance, but more importantly, our insignificance in the world. I think that for all of us, it's easy to know that we're all special and unique, but that recognition and sense of perspective that we're in the whole scheme of things, we're tiny and small and ephemeral, and that we have to understand our place in the world, and that I think in many ways we eliminate ego by having a sense of humility. And it's so important, and I think that especially in today's day and age with social media and the way that, general media is, a sense of humility is really, really valuable.
It really is. And I had a guest on, and I'm not going to remember who it was because I talked to a lot of amazing people. And he said something that I will never forget. And it was advice that he received when he was young, maybe right out of college or something like that. And it was like someone said to him, "You're really not that big of a deal.
Right.
But you are a big deal." Like, I'm paraphrasing it. But it was like, yes, we're special, we're important, you're unique. But at the same time,
you're absolutely right.
We're nothing.
And in many ways,
we're nobody.
There's a great quote that I use from C.S. Lewis, who says, humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And I think it's so critical in many ways. And for me, humbling ourselves and having humility, it reduces in many ways the anxiety and weight that we carry. We don't have that sense of self-importance or maybe self-centeredness or even self-absorption. And so that's why I love the idea of humility in this book. To me, it's been essential in getting a clearer vision of what peace and joy looks like, because I know that in the grand scheme of things, we're all special, but, not all that big. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And the last
acceptance to me is
one
the
of my
appropriate
favorite
anchor for this perspective. Yeah. And I mentioned the idea of flexibility, but I think acceptance at its real minimum is the idea of rootiness in reality. I think that acceptance has to do with a acknowledgement of the truth and living in that reality rather than regretting how things you wish they were, rather than, I think the idea of accepting how they are rather than regretting how they're not is a better way of saying it. And I believe that acceptance really is a sign of maturity.
I like that.
It takes a long time to get there, but in many ways, when we do, we're able to at least acknowledge the truth and live in that. And that idea of flexibility is because we can hold conflicting thoughts. We can say, look, I recognize that I don't feel good about this. It upsets me, but I can also feel happy, and I have the capacity to hold both of those conflicting emotions. And acceptance, I think, is a very, very healthy quality. In many ways, I feel like when we find the positive in something to make peace with it, that can really accelerate the idea of acceptance. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is a hard thing. I have a 21-year-old son, and it's interesting because sometimes his level of acceptance is pretty good, but then there's other times where, there's no reasoning with the kid at all.
Yeah.
And so I do think it does happen with maturity, with age, with
no
the
question.
wisdom that
And you're right.
over the years of just
I think
living
what
in
happens
this
is
life.
we gain a sense of perspective along the way as we get older and hopefully more mature, and we understand, look, there are things we may not like, but we also know that we can't control. We can only control how we feel about them. And ultimately, we start to take responsibility for things, and we let go of things much easier. So in time, hopefully we get there. And you used, obviously, a very special word there, wisdom, which is something that over time, some of us develop. Yeah.
Right. And it takes a long time. So now you said your book came out a couple days ago, but then I thought you said it's coming out in April.
We just came out on 2/22/22.
Or is it like in the pre-release stage?
And it's been really well received so far. The first day we're the number one new release on Amazon. We received bestseller status in 3 different categories between self-help and psychology reference. And it's gratifying because I really wanted to write this perspective and have it be kind of this warm guide, sort of a companion, the type of book you'd keep on your nightstand. It's a short book. It's 22,000 words, but it's meant to be comforting. And even through the colors of the book and the kaleidoscope kind of effect, the vibrancy and colors that capture the essence of the unicorn, it's meant to be something that is for everyone. And I think there are timeless and universal insights. I use parables and great quotes and fables and old stories that everyone can relate to.
I love
Thank
it.
you.
I can't wait to read it. I love the title. It's catchy.
I appreciate it.
And gosh, I hope it continues to do well.
Just to
Yeah. So
everyone
is there
too, I
anything
hope
else that
continue
you'd like to share with the audience
on,
today?
on their own journey in their own time, and obviously through all you're doing. Through I love Happiness Solved, and if there's any way that I could connect with people at theunicorninyu.com or joshkramer.com, I love hearing what works for everyone else, because I don't believe there's a one size fits all. And as I say in The Unicorn in You, it's a path to peace and joy, and hopefully it's helpful to some people. Thank you.
Oh gosh, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it is, and will be.
Had a great conversation. Thanks for having me.
Josh, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you.